Hello again, everybody. So, I know in my last video about Halo, I said that I wasn't exactly planning on making another review, but you know what? I just saw the Halo finale, and it was just so bad. I had to talk about the rest of the episodes. So, I'm gonna try to make this quick because I'll be honest. The Halo finale episode aside, like, I've already had a pretty rough day, so I'll try to make this one quick. So, if I recall correctly, my first video, I stopped at about episode 4 because I released it about a day before the 5th episode came out. So, let's start there, and I'm gonna try to go through these as quick as possible. So, episode 5, Quan and John, they're still separated, and John is still on the planet Aridnas, with Halsey and Halsey's assistant, and they find that second keystone. Well, actually, no, they do find the second keystone. They do. And John discovers that not only did he originally find it when he was a little boy, but he also discovers that that Halsey kidnapped him as a child and then brainwashed him, and can't remember if she mentions it in the next episode or that one, but she also sent like a flash clone, as they call it, of John to his parents, who died in a very short period of time. But when he touches the keystone and he gets all those memories back, he gets blinded with rage and tries to kill Halsey, but at the last second, Cortana like shuts down his nervous system or something, but she basically knocks him unconscious. And that was really the entire gist of over half of the episode. Or at least that's everything that was going on with John. And I'm not calling him Master Chief because he's not Master Chief. He's just John. So then over with Quan Ha's story, she and Soren are still on Magical, looking for these witches that were mentioned either in that episode or the one prior to it. But while they're looking for them, Soren straight up tells her that like she's gonna get herself killed, so instead he's just gonna bring her back, and also he's owed like a ship, and he's also owed like a shit ton of money. So he handcuffs her to like this motorbike in the middle of the desert while he looks for some wheels. That's what he said too. I'm just copying it. Eventually he comes back, and then Quan is somehow able to break free of her restraints, and then she tases him, knocks him out, and also steals his gun. So again, all that did was reinforce my opinion that like she's either gonna kill Soren herself or she's just gonna get him killed, and that's really all she did. So then it keeps periodically going between like John and Quan and like some of the other characters, because we find out that Captain Keyes was also in on like the whole kidnapping thing that Halsey did. There were a few scenes with that blonde soldier Kai where John takes one look at her like dyed hair, the one that she dyed with the gun grease. And he basically just tells her that like she's not like properly prepped for deployment, basically, because he knew that she removed her pellet that suppresses the emotions, And the funniest part is that like both Kai and Cortana actually called John out for being a hypocrite in that one, which that one is true, because he wasn't prepped for field duty either. But he just brushes them off, so whatever. Oh. I can't remember which episode it is exactly, but since I'm remembering it now, I'm mentioning it now. If you guys remember back in my previous video, I said that like putting gun grease in your hair or gun oil in your hair, like that's probably not a good thing, and like them. And that was my own guess, because I've never seen anyone like actually put gun oil in their hair, no matter if they liked the color or whatever. But I always assume that if something like that happens, then like it could damage your hair, or it could like damage your scalp, or like do something to it. And well, they don't exactly say anything like that, but that one other Spartan, Vanek, he actually calls her out and says something similar in one of these episodes, where like Kai is starts asking questions, and she goes like, do you know why the Covenant hates us, or do you want to know why they hate us, or do you wonder why? Stupid shit like that. So Vanek just snaps at her and says something along the lines of like, I'm starting to wonder if that gun grease in your hair soaked into your brain because you're asking me dumbass questions. That was actually kind of funny. Oh, and you'll see that, you'll see in the coming episodes that, like, there's a couple of things that I mentioned that, well, they turned out to be true, or at least semi-true, whether, like, they're in, like, big ways or small ways. And, like, my suspicions got confirmed, a lot in the finale. So back with John, once Cortana finally wakes him up, the Covenant finally show up on Aridness to take the Keystone, right? And this is probably one of the only best scenes in the series. Like, so the first scene that's the best is obviously like in the pilot episode where Master Chief and the Spartans were taking out all of those elites. And I think the second best scene is obviously the one that I'm going to talk about now, where they finally fight the Covenant. Like, after 4 episodes of doing nothing, they finally fight them again. Where, like, Master Chief is, like, chucking his pistol at some jackals, like he's John Wick. And then he picks up a shotgun and demolishes them. And then a little bit later, he and Silver Team go into a Warthog and just go straight for the Keystone. There is one moment that's kind of stupid, though, where, like, Kai, just like Master Chief said, isn't prepped for battle. And she ends up having, like, those, like, PTSD breathing moments, like you see in all those movies, like, or since, you know, this is a Steven Spielberg production, another great example would be, like, Saving Private Ryan, like, those scenes on D-Day where Tom Hanks is, like, heavily breathing and, like, there's muffled noise all around him, and, like, it's just chaos on the Normandy beach. It's kind of similar here, like, because Kai's looking around, like, the battlefield is just complete chaos, there's explosions going around her, and, like, you know, obviously she freezes up because, again, just like John said, she's not prepped for battle. So she gets incapacitated really quickly. John sees this, and despite what Cortana is telling him, he's saying that, like, oh, I can't let her die. So he jumps off the Warthog, gets onto the underside of a Banshee, and then instead of hijacking it like you do in the games, he literally maneuvers his body to aim the Banshee toward toward this bigger Covenant ship, and it makes both of them explode. Now, I will admit, I did think that scene was badass, where he's able to steer a Banshee from the underside into another ship, but I also think it probably would have been better if he just hijacked it, like people normally do in the video games. But whatever. But then he, emerges from the wreckage, again, still badass. And then, he just demolishes the jackals that are beating on Kai. An elite comes down, and, he beats it with his bare fists. And while it's down, he just starts mercilessly beating on it, like the Punisher beating Rollins in the Season 1 finale of his show. And while he's doing it, there's a close-up of John's face inside the helmet where he's just screaming. So, again, it's giving off the vibes of, the Punisher. And, unfortunately, because of all that, that causes him to get distracted when, a Covenant Brute shows up. At least I think it's a Covenant Brute. I haven't played the Halo games in a while. I've only played the multiplayer of Halo Infinite. So, I think that big, hairy, ape-like alien is a Covenant Brute. But, a Brute comes down with, I think, a grav hammer, and, just smacks John just across the battlefield, takes the keystone, leaves, and then that one Covenant woman, McKee, the only human member of the Covenant, she drops down in an escape pod to make it look like she escaped them. So, and that's how the episode ends. John finds McKee, immediately takes off his helmet after the battle, when I'm pretty sure that they should have probably done something to make sure that the Covenant wouldn't be there again. But whatever. So that's how the episode ends. Episode 5, I mean. Episode 6, it opens up with McKee being interrogated on Reach? It was either Reach or on one of their flagships. I can't remember. I really don't care at this point. But Master Chief just goes back interrogating her too. He straight up asks, oh, well, the Covenant just killed a bunch of my friends, and then you show up just out of the blue, so why the hell should I trust you? Which is a great question. And apparently all she has to do to gain his trust is say, well, I'm like you. Okay, fine. And she even explains, elaborates that, I'm like you, she's not talking about, I'm human like you. She means, I'm a blessed one like you. I can activate the artifacts, the keystones, right? And when she said that Master Chief, John, because again, not Master Chief, he doesn't even wear his armor at all in episode 6, by the way. It's just that black jumpsuit thing. The minute she explained that, she's a blessed one that can activate keystones, that immediately should have set off alarm bells in John's head. Because if you guys remember way back during episode 2, that one crazy guy who knows about the keystones, he outright said, when he was talking about how John can activate the keystones, he straight up said, oh, you're like the other blessed one that the Covenant had. So that immediately should have set off alarm bells in his head that, maybe she's still working with the Covenant. But no, he immediately trusts her. They both go outside to enjoy nature or some kind of bullcrap like that. John activates the keystone at some point. I don't know. yeah, episode 6, really nothing happened. The only thing that really happened was, jeez, it's stupid. The only thing that really happened was that
going there would be a really
eventually at the end of the episode, John activates the keystone, right? And he holds onto it for so long, it eventually gives him a vision of the Halo ring world where they can see the Halo ring. And I'm saying they because not only is he transported to that vision, but so is McKee. And like they do that weird thing where like they look at each other fondly and John touches her face, and like that's how the episode ends. It gets worse a couple episodes later when Master Chief comes back. And the reason why I say a couple episodes later is because the episode immediately after that, it's all about Quan Ha. Which, by the way, Quan Ha barely was in episode 6. Like, she was in this like little hallucination thing that John had, but that was about it. But yeah, episode 7, it seemed like they decided to overcompensate for that by having it be all about Quan. So, Quan is still looking for those witches, and Soren, off-screen, woke up, found a ship, went back to his, like, little asteroid colony world, whatever, and then he started talking about, like, how, oh yeah, I kicked her ass and then I came home, that kind of, crap, and one of his partners calls him out on that because, like, oh, he doesn't have his ship and he doesn't have his gun. Right, so then they decide to pull this score on like a UNSC ship, and Soren drops like a crate on his foot just to show him who's the boss. And eventually he does go back to Magical because reasons. Maybe he just wanted his gun back, I don't know. Which he does say that later in the episode too. But back to Quan, she eventually does find the witches. They basically roofie her. Oh, and I'm not exaggerating that either. Like, one of the witches, like, she turns this fire into water, puts the water in this bowl or something, and then has Quan drink it. And then she gets this hallucination about Master Chief. Sorry for the sirens. It's high noon right now where I'm from. So she drinks a roofie, and she has a hallucination of Master Chief, and she assumes that, like, oh, I'm supposed to fight him, right? So Quan tries to use like a chain, a knife, and rocks, and attacking him with his bare hands, and Chief does pretty much nothing in response to all that, except for like just literally slapping Quan around. Which, I'll admit, like, I did laugh my ass off at those scenes. Because it seems like those were the only times that, like, you know, Master Chief was actually Master Chief, kept his helmet on, and, like, you know, he didn't take any crap from Quan, which is what he shouldn't have done back in the very first episode. But, that scene is way too short because she almost immediately breaks down because she can't fight him, and Master Chief helps her up, leads her out like the little hut that the witches were in, and by then, like, he's out of his armor again, and John leads her to this well where she has a vision of her father, the guy who died in the very first episode, and the father explains to her that, like, oh, it's your destiny to protect this well because it's actually a portal. And I'm assuming that the portal is supposed to lead to the Ring world. But I don't know. Maybe they'll explain that crap in season 2. I don't know. What else happened? So yeah, the father, Jinha, I think that was his name. He explained that it's their family's destiny to protect people, and that's why they want independence from the UNSC for so long. So she finds out she's supposed to protect the portal, and she also discovers that eventually Master Chief will return for her, and she will lead him to the portal. And then after that, she finds out that Venture, that one political guy, the UNSC plant, he's coming for her. Soren shows up out of the blue. They never show how he got back to Madrigal, but whatever. They decide to hole up in that one settlement, the one that the Covenant destroyed in the first episode. And they set a really big trap for Venture and his men. And at first it doesn't work until Quan finds Master Chief's rifle. It even has the 117 on it. And she shoots a fuel line, causes a huge explosion, kills all the guys. And then she lets Soren go. Well, Soren leaves. He offers to help her, but she declines it. And she decides to just stay on Madrigal, and that's how that episode ends. And honestly, I thought that this would be the worst episode by far because it has the least Master Chief in it. And has the most Quan Ha in it, and Quan's just annoying as hell. Like, even after that whole revelation, she still comes off as like a bratty little kid. So I thought that episode 7 was like rock bottom, but believe it or not, the episode that comes after that has literally no Quan, by the way. That episode is the worst, and it's just the worst solely for a short 2-minute scene. So episode 8 comes out. Actually, hang on a second. Going back to episode 6. So that scene where I was talking about where John and McKee were outside, like, enjoying nature, that didn't actually happen until episode 8. So yeah, so that means I remember even less about episode 6 now that I think about it. But so episode 8. It opens with John snapping out of that Halo memory, Halo vision thing. I haven't mentioned Halsey much because, like, really after John opened the Pandora's box about Halsey kidnapping him as a child, brainwashing him, having his parents mourn for a dead mutant clone. Really, Halsey has done next to nothing aside from, like, get court-martialed and held accountable for what she's done. And that's what the other characters say on the show, not me, so jeez. I'm sorry, I can barely remember anything from this stuff, just the bad parts. Episode 8, John doesn't have his armor on at all in this episode either, unfortunately. But yeah, John and McKee, they go outside and enjoy nature. Somehow that gets John to trust her. Okay. They go back to her cell on Reach, and I shit you not, they strip down and have sex. I'm not making this up at all. Like, John literally sleeps with the enemy. And apparently after their their night of making love, McKee decides, oh, I don't want to work for the Covenant anymore. So she rips out that fingernail that had the energy blade finger thing and just like flushes it down the drain. Which I will admit, I will give points for like it looking really brutal, because like that thing must have been in there deep, because there was quite a bit of like skin and muscle or something in there when she ripped it out, but it looked pretty gnarly and she flushed it. But oh, and Cortana was watching that whole thing with John and Keith fucking. Great. So now Cortana is a peeper. Good to know. Apparently she relays it back to Halsey, and Halsey outright describes it as John having a girlfriend. So, whatever Reddit post that was, that had a theory that the reason why they made McKee human was so that she and John could have sex. Congratulations, you were right. Good job. So they have sex. Cortana tells Halsey. Halsey has this plan that we'll take Master Chief, Key, and the artifact with us. Even though I'm being held accountable for my actions, and the Admiral wants me off the planet. I'm just gonna go find this Halo ring on my own because it's gonna save humanity. Whatever. There is a moment where Captain Key sees her and he basically calls her out and basically burning every single bridge she ever had, and he outright asks her how much she's willing to sacrifice, and she snaps out she'll sacrifice everything, and basically everyone, though she didn't outright say that one. I honestly can't remember if Holly was this cold-blooded in the games. I don't. But I don't know. I'm losing steam right now in my rant. I'm sorry, guys. But anyway, so Halsey gets the bright idea to kidnap John again, McKee, for the first time this time, and the artifact. So, and she's gonna have Cortana help out with it, because turns out Cortana was designed this whole series to take over the Master Chief's body, right? Well, I guess after seeing John and McKee make love, Cortana had a change of heart, and she decides to rebel against Halsey and actually help John and McKee escape. And they're in the hangar on Reach or whatever. Meanwhile, Halsey has told the rest of Silver Team to incapacitate Kai, because her pellet is out and she'd help John, and then take out John, actually kill him if they have to, because at that point all they need is McKee for the artifact. So the two Spartans who are still loyal to Halsey, which are Riz and Vaneth, they find John and McKee. They start fighting. McKee goes to find the room with the artifact, right? And I'll admit, the fight scene with John and the Spartans, it actually is a little bit cool, where he's using the weights and dumbbells to fight them and use them as melee weapons, even though I doubt they do much. It is kind of reminiscent of that one Punisher scene in season 2 where he's at the Russian gym. So I thought that was pretty cool. But you know what would have been cooler? If he has frickin' armor on. Because again, he doesn't wear his armor at all in episode 8. Cortana helps him out a little bit. Eventually Kai frees herself and joins the fight. And then right when they're at a standstill, that's when McKee finds the artifact. The Marines and the Marines escort her there. But earlier in the episode, Halsey's daughter Miranda, she found out that
If you've reached this point in my
she found out
recordings,
through like a recording,
I choose to believe you've
through a
closed
Covenant
the
language
portal.
recording, that the person
Mankind will never know what you've
who
avoided,
attacked that
but
one
you
ship
and
back in
I
episode
do.
3 was McKee when she used those hunter worms, the Lecolos, I think. But she found out that's what the Covenant language was saying, and she found out that the voice was McKee's, right? So
Hey, this is bullshit. Nope.
So Miranda and Captain Keyes, they get the admiral. They corner McKee, and McKee tries to say like she had no choice at all because she was working for the Covenant at the time, and like I guess she's a good guy now. But whatever. A Marine tosses her to the floor and just tases her, and she immediately gets like PTSD flashbacks of when she was being worked to the bone on that one planet and when the Covenant saved her. So, and I guess that's enough for her to like switch sides again and work for the Covenant again. Like, holy cow, like in the past 2 episodes alone, like this character McKee has done so many 180s. I'm surprised her head hasn't fallen off. But fine, so she decides, fuck it, I'm working with the Covenant again. Touches the artifact, makes the Admiral, the Keyes', Miranda and Captain Keyes, they all fall to the floor. And I don't know if it was because this one Marine was touching McKee's shoulder at the time to stop her, but when she touched the artifact, he ended up getting disintegrated. Oh, no, not disintegrated, just badly burned to death. But it was almost disintegration. But that creates a huge shockwave throughout basically the entire Reach base that it also sends John into that vision back in the Halo ring world. And McKee basically says, like, yeah, I'm peacing out, goodbye. And it ends with John falling to the ground with his face just smushed into the floor. And like that's the ending shot. Like, you guys, does anyone remember the opening scene of A Christmas Story where Ralphie's younger brother Randy is like looking through the glass of a toy shop and like his nose is just like pressed up, kind of like a pig's? That's kind of what Master Chief's face looked like when he hit the floor before the credits rolled. And like, I know I'm nitpicking, but it just looked awful. Like, his nose was just smashed to the left side. It was bad. It was. So that's how episode 8 ended. Episode 9, it basically picked up right after that. McKee's escaping with the artifact. She kills a Marine, and for some reason, she actually hesitates right after killing one, because, like, maybe she is having a second, I don't know, but I don't know why she'd feel so nervous about killing a Marine by shooting him in the head after she already killed, like, a UNSC Admiral or whatever back on that one flagship back during episode 3 with the Hunter Wounds. Whatever. So, she escapes. Halsey escapes without anything. Kai tries to bring her in, and all she does is end up killing Halsey's assistant. I don't know, it's really hard to figure out. It's really hard to remember what all happens in the show when the intro scene is the best part of the entire series. And, you know, it turns out that's the scene that actually has Master Chief in his armor and his helmet on. Whatever. So, oh, and on the bright side, this episode doesn't have one on it either, so points for that, I guess. But after Halsey and McKee escape, Master Chief finally gets his armor back on, and with the help of Cortana, they find out where the Covenant's like holy place is, which they'd use to find the Halo ring. And in a previous episode, like, McKee mentioned this one planet where initially the Marines didn't find anything, but after figuring out like a clue that they heard from the Covenant, like, John finds out where exactly they need to go. So he and Silver Team suit up. Kai has one moment where like she's asking if Vanek or Riz will have actually shot them, and like, you know, they say yes. And Kai starts complaining about how they're cold-blooded, and they actually call her out because at that same time Kai was ready to shoot them too, and all Kai says in her defense is like, well, yeah, but I would have felt bad about it. And I know that's just another nitpick, but
just fine.
I don't know. Again, there's not a lot of stuff that I can remember from all this crap. So the Spartans, they take a Pelican, they go to, they find the planet, once they get there, I was hoping that it would have action on the same level as like episode 5 and episode 1, because, you know, apparently they only want to fight the Covenant for 3 episodes of the 9, but whatever. So they get to the Covenant, building, Holy Land, Holy Base, whatever. And I thought that would be good action, except right when Master Chief, because he has his armor and helmet, right when he's about to start fighting, McKee touches the artifact, and it makes John go all woozy, and he gets spotted by the Covenant. And like, oh, the jig is up, now the Covenant is ready to just throw hands now. Oh, and that reminds me. So earlier in the episode, like, McKee returns with the artifacts, right? And she's starting to ask like where her place is in the Great Journey with the Halo, right? And like the prophets say that there's always going to be a place for the Blessed One. Well, you guys remember how I said that there's a couple things I'd be right about for this series, whether it's big or small. Well, you guys remember back in my first video, I said that like one of the only ways that would make sense for McKee being human and being like this high up in like the hierarchy of the Covenant would be if it turns out the prophets were actually just using her for her gifts, because like, you know, like having a Blessed One cooperate with them is technically better than like if she was enslaved and like they forced her to activate the Keystones. Like the only way that would work is if like the prophets revealed that like, oh, they were just using her, and like the minute they found the Keystones or the minute they found the Halo, they just killed her. Well, I was right about that, because there's like a short scene where like where McKee is like anointing herself in those robes that we saw in the first episode, and like the prophets are busy talking to themselves because like one of them, Prophet Regret, I think, or whatever it was, he's talking about how like how McKee has already soiled their land with her presence because she's a human. And the prophet who like basically sponsored her, Mercy, he admitted like, yeah, I'm gonna keep my promise to you, Like,
Many have
once
perished
we
protecting
get
this
what we
artifact.
want, like, yeah, she's gonna die. So at least I was right that the Covenant was just using her all along, just to find the Halo ring. And once they do find it, they will end up killing her. So that somewhat lessens the blow of McKee being human and everything, but it's still stupid. But anyway, so back to what's currently happening in the episode. Like, John becomes woozy, the Covenant gets alerted, they start fighting. John tries his best to fight off the Covenant, but because apparently they decide to not make Chief badass in this. And this is gonna be the worst fight with the Covenant, by the way, because Chief gets all emotional and everything, and he starts fighting that brute again from episode 5. And McKee sees him fighting, and like she suddenly decides like, oh, I don't want him to die, so she touches the artifact, which releases another shockwave that sends almost all of the Covenant like over a cliff. But then John ends up in like the vision of the ring world with her, and they start talking about like, oh, you gotta send me back, McKee, and McKee's telling him like, no, I'm not going back. And it goes back and forth like that until Kai finally jumps up and just shoots her in the chest, and ends up killing McKee in a very unsatisfying way. John gets taken out of trance, but like, he's still all beat up, so he's asking Cortana what his options are, and she says like, well, you can either only save your team or you can take home the artifact. So then John has the bright idea of saying like, well, how about you take control of my body? Like, I know you said that you don't want to take over my body anymore, but just take over. And Cortana keeps saying like, no, she doesn't want to do that because like she likes him now and she likes humanity and blah blah blah, all that crap. So the way John convinces her is he literally walks up to the brute, lets him smash his body with the grav hammer, and that's what it takes for Cortana to finally decide like, okay, I'm taking over your body, I'm gonna finish the mission for you. Boom, done. So she takes over his body, and this is the one scene in almost the entire show, aside from like the pilot and aside from episode 5, where Master Chief is finally Master Chief, or he just picks up 2 plasma pistols, just kills all the grunts, tosses them away. And I'm assuming this was Cortana that did. Like, Cortana like summons the Pelican to like smash into the brute, and then like Master Chief controlled by Cortana, because like basically he's now just a mindless zombie. He picks up the keystone without like triggering a shockwave, and just carries it into the Pelican. The rest of the team comes in, they lick their wounds, and that's it. Oh, and when Halsey escapes, like, she also created a flash clone to be captured by the UNSC. And like the episode ends with basically Halsey basically on the run, because she wants to find the Halo Ring for herself, and Master Chief and Silver Team like are going back to Reach, and like it's obvious that like Cortana's in control now, because like John doesn't even speak anymore, which, okay, I'm fine with that. Kind of a shame that it took him to die and then Cortana to take over for him to finally become the Master Chief from the video games, but fine. So it's kind of funny because like so I'm always ragging about how movies these days keep bringing back classic fan favorite characters just to kill them off. Well, this show actually took it a step further by killing Master Chief in the first season. And like there was Cortana did mention like there's a chance that she won't be able to bring him back, right? Well, that's probably a tease for season 2. That John's probably gonna come back at some point, whether it's gonna be at the end of the episode or if it's gonna be like a season-long thing. Fine, but as of now, John is dead. He basically committed suicide. Well, assisted suicide. And let somebody else just use his body as a meat puppet. You already jumped the shark once, Halo. You already jumped it when you had John sleep with McKee. And then you jump it again by killing him. God, this show sucks. I do feel bad for the fans of the games, cause I'm pretty casual when I play games like that. So I do feel bad for the people who actually looked forward to this show back when like it was announced way back in I think 2014. And like this is what they get. Like, it's barely even Halo because, like, they barely fight the Covenant.
If you've reached this point in my recordings, beyond all reason, I choose to believe you've closed the portal.
Just... why?
Mankind will never know what
on the bright side, they did kill McKee.
But you and I do.
Because that character
That, my
sucked.
friends, is how we do
Like,
things in the Wolverine.
she did so many heel turns in the show. Like, just in the final 3 episodes... well, the final 2 episodes, more like it.
Legendary artifact with power to burn undead flesh.
Like her character just wasn't interesting anymore. And they did cut out Quan after episode 7.
You now possess
But
the
I'm
lost
pretty sure she's
treasures
gonna show
and
up in
Kandarian
season 2.
dagger, and must face the dark
Oh my
arts.
god.
I wish you the best of luck.
There's really not much else that I can say that was actually good about this. Because everything they do, they make it crappy again. Like, the only stuff I enjoyed was, like, the fight scenes with the Covenant when, you know, John was actually being, like, Master Chief from the games. And I didn't even mind, like, his flashbacks. And, like, I don't know, the people who made the show, like, I know they admitted that they didn't play the games, but it seems like they also barely read the books, because that's not Master Chief, and that's... Why'd they go with Silver Team instead of Blue Team? And, like, I get what the writer said about, like, again, I get what the writer said about having more freedom. I get that, I do. But they didn't have to... They didn't have to, like, recreate the game cutscene for cutscene, you know? Like, one of the most recent, like, Marvel TV shows was Moon Knight. And they definitely did not go panel for panel on that show. Like, the main villain of that show, like, Arthur Harrow, he's nothing like his comic book counterpart. Or, like, the main character, Moon Knight, Stephen Grant. Like, Stephen's not like a gift shop employee in the comics. He's basically like a billionaire like Bruce Wayne. But it was still pretty faithful to the character.
It's the only way to end
or at least to the Moon Knight side. But they could have done stuff like that for the Halo show. Like, they didn't have to do things that were so drastically different. Because, like, that's not Master Chief. That's not the Spartans. I'm assuming that that's not Halsey. And that's definitely not the Covenant. If they were willing to let a human be in their ranks for that long, even though they outright admitted that, like, they were going to kill her off once she outlived her usefulness. Like, there's no way that they'd keep up the charade for, like, you can only assume for at least 10-15 years, just based on, like, the actress's real age. But whatever, I'm done with this show. Season 2, I don't know, I'm not planning on watching it, but then again, I also wasn't planning on making this other video. And I also wasn't planning on this video to be as long as it was, so sorry about that. But I just had to get it all off my chest. I'm out of steam. Crap. I just... Why, Spielberg? Why is it that... why have you been making such duds lately? Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the West Side Story remake, and now this. Should have just given it to the fans. But that's really all I have to say for this show. I know in my previous video I said that, like, if you're not a fan of games, like, you know very little about the story, like, even less than I do, like, you might find some enjoyment out of this. Well, now I'm retracting that, because, like, it's just an awful show all around. It is. But...
I dare not assume you will manage to close the breach. But
whatever.
if by some
I'm
chance
done.
you have-
I'll see you guys
Bloody
next year when
eternal
Season 2
gratitude.
comes out, or not. I really don't care anymore.
Well, thank the big man upstairs, it's over. I just wanted to get laid.